The truth is, the 2% rent cap has put both landlords and tenants in a tough position. On one hand, while rents are capped, costs have been skyrocketing for landlords, everything such as maintenance, taxes, insurance, utilities, interest rates, and so on. And on the other hand, it's basically impossible for tenants to find affordable housing or even reasonably priced housing. And this is only getting worse. The rent cap has been 2% since it was implemented in 2020, and as of January 1st, 2024, this is increasing to 5%. So with the rent cap in place, how is it that rents have skyrocketed in Nova Scotia over the last 3 years? I mean, it's capped at 2%, right? This is what I'm going to talk about in today's video. Now, just before I get into it, if you're new here, my name's Andrew Stephens, and I've been a realtor in Halifax for 9 years. And if you want to be educated on the Halifax real estate market, this is the channel for you. So hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to book a call or a meeting with me to chat about real estate at any time, you can do so in the Calendly link below my description at a time when it's convenient for you. Recently, CBC released an article titled, "Why Big Halifax Landlords Are Reporting Average Rent Increases Above the Nova Scotia Rent Cap." Both Killam and CapREIT, who are two of Halifax's largest landlords, reported average rental increases over the 2% rent cap in 2023. In fact, they were both over double the 2% rent cap in 2023, and they reported average rent increases of over 2% every single year since the rent cap was put into place in 2020. Now, this is mainly because of unit turnover. So the big thing here is the rent cap is only in place for those tenants who are currently in those units. So in other words, if I am on the 2% rent cap and I'm paying $1,200 a month for my unit, when I go to leave, that landlord can put that rent at anything they want. So if it's grossly undervalued in terms of the market rent right now, and let's say somebody's paying $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month, when they go to leave, that unit is going to be up to like $1,500, $1,600, $1,700, $1,800 or more a month. In other words, when those units are turned over, we're seeing increases on those of anywhere from 50 all the way up to 100%, or even more in some cases where the rents might have been extremely low with a tenant who was in there very long term. And because of the rent cap, when the landlord has the opportunity to set the rent at whatever they want, they're really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in terms of how high they can push this rent to help offset the cost of some of the lower units throughout their portfolio as well. This is a big reason why we're seeing the rents skyrocketing in Nova Scotia, and it's also handcuffing tenants as well, because a lot of these tenants, if you're on the rent cap, you don't want to leave because you can't find anything at that price again. So in other words, if you're one of the people who's lucky enough to be paying, say, $1,300, $1,400, or $1,500 for a 2-bedroom apartment in Halifax, but you need more room, you need a different location, or whatever that might be, you're not going to be able to find something similar for less than probably $2,000 a month, and even that is getting more and more difficult to find for a decent-sized 2-bedroom apartment in Halifax. So while tenants are getting pinched, the big bad REITs are making more money, which you can see here in this graph. Something to consider is with the rent cap in place, it may actually make things worse, as these companies are going to want to turn over units more often due to the situation that they're in with the lower rents capped in some of their units. These companies are for profit. They're using their own private funds to operate a business. So can we really blame them for what has happened here? Both Killam and CapREIT responded to this article, and they said that they don't do any rent evictions. It's not in their business model. And in fact, they're lucky enough to renovate very many units in the run of a year because their vacancies are so low. And I will point out that both of these companies have been known to work with affordable housing initiatives and with CMHC financing as well. So this would be keeping some of their units under market rents as part of this financing and some of these affordable housing initiatives. So back to the issue at hand. Who's really to blame for our housing problem? The rent cap itself? Maybe. While it gives with one hand, it sort of takes with the other. The landlords? Maybe, but let's face it, if you owned a rental property that you could rent for $2,000 a month, would you really take $1,200? All while your costs are rising, and by the way, if your rents don't cover all your costs, then you're out of pocket on your own personal money to cover your mortgage and all the other expenses. What about the government? Yes, let's face it, they've kicked this can so far down the road that in my opinion, we're basically past the point of no return. Not to mention the government has been taxing rental rental properties to death, and this higher cost of carrying and higher cost of creation and maintenance is all going to funnel down directly to higher rents put on the tenants. What about supply and demand? Yes, absolutely, but let's face it, this is not going to change anytime soon. We're adding more people to Halifax per year than the housing units that we're building, and we're already extremely behind in the supply that we really need to have a healthy, balanced rental market in Halifax and in Nova Scotia as a whole. And last but not least, what about the pandemic? Yes, that's certainly to blame, but really, what can we do about that? We can't go back in time, but this affected the cost, it affected the interest rates, it affected the supply chain, labor shortages, all kinds of things like that. So that put a lot of strain on contractors and developers, i.e. landlords, and this really is a big reason why we are where we are today. But let's face it, I believe we were heading here anyway. I think the pandemic and the supply chain and all that just escalated the timeline of how long it was going to take us to get here. To be honest, I don't really know the answer, but I'm not sure the government does either. The major issues that we have in our market are not going anywhere anytime soon, and this is a really key factor. We have very little supply for the demand that we're currently seeing, and we're adding more and more people to the province, and we can't build the houses fast enough to keep up, so this is not going to change anytime soon. In fact, I would consider this to be just the tip of the iceberg of where this thing could go. And the government has been putting a lot of initiatives in place lately, but again, this should have been 10, 15, or 20 years ago. Let's face it, they didn't build any public housing for 30 years in Nova Scotia, but it is good to see them doing something. I just fear that it is too little, too late, and by the time they build all these types of units in 5 or 6 years from now, we're going to be just as far behind the 8 ball as we are today. So that is my big worry going forward. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting that the rent cap needs to go or that it needs to stay. I understand this is a very complex situation with a lot of variables involved. I think the increase to 5% in January was the PC's way of trying to find a meet in the middle because they had to do something with the rent cap, but at the same time, let's face it, if they took it off altogether, it would be an absolute train wreck across the province. So I think this is one of those situations where it's a bit of a meet in the middle and everybody is not happy, but everybody is going to live with it. If you're still here watching, I would love to hear what you think about this topic in the comments below. And I know this is a tough topic, so let's keep it respectful down there. And if you're still here watching and you got any value out of this video, all I ask is that you hit that like button and you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future content. And that'll help push this out to more people like you who may be interested in seeing content about the Halifax real estate market. And until next time, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it, and have a great day.